Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just hit that notification button to be notified about our next show. You're live with the App Show. Mike Agerbo here with fellow app nerds John Biehler and Graham Williams. Got an awesome show today. We'll be chatting later on about music subscription services. I think a lot of people have signed up for Spotify or Apple, maybe even using Amazon Music. Well, there's another big one out there called Tidal, and we'll be exploring why you might want to have a look at that if you are really into music and the overall quality of the sound of it. There's some really cool things happening with that. We'll also be talking about Huawei in a couple different aspects. In a bit here, we've got Kirk LaPointe on from Business in Vancouver. He's the publisher and editor-in-chief over there. And we'll be chatting about Huawei's 5G ambitions here in Canada, just kind of falling apart right now. TELUS and Bell have announced that they are going to go another direction using Nokia's technology instead. And we'll be chatting what the Trudeau government is doing and as far as their decision moving forward. They were supposed to have made one already, but they haven't. And we'll be chatting about why. Let's talk about some of the news in the app world right now, guys. Interesting article we've got up on our website, GetConnectedMedia.com, talking about a cool camera app called Anonymous Camera. Graham, tell us more.
So this is a really cool app for sharing video or images online. And the idea here is that it will blur or remove faces and sensitive data that you can then share. So, for example, if you are at a protest, these things happen from time to time, and you wanted to be able to share an image without violating the privacy of people around you, it uses AI to auto-detect people in the image and then can automatically block and blur those faces out. It'll also strip the metadata out. We've actually talked about a few apps on this show that do that as well. So, removing things like the location data, the type of camera that took it, and basically, again, sort of anonymizing that image so it can be shared without being traced back to a particular person.
One thing I thought was really kind of cool about it is it actually has the ability to alter your voice as well, to hide it. Kind of like when you see those, deep throat reporter interviews where they've mechanically changed their voices. You can kind of do that with this app as well.
Yeah, really, really great way to make sure that people are able to share information that probably does need to be seen, but without being perhaps targeted by people that may not be happy that information is being shared.
Again, if you want to link to that app and a little bit more information, check out our website, getconnectedmedia.com, and it's called Anonymous Camera. Graham, big announcement this week, and I know you are just probably drooling all about it. Sony has brought out details about their last console. We'll talk about that.
So the PlayStation 5 was just revealed, and I've got to say it is absolutely gorgeous. We were looking at sort of the progression from the original Xbox and the PlayStation to sort of these blocky representations of technology from the mid-2000s, and this thing looks like a sports car. It actually reminds me of the BMW i8. It's beautiful, white, black, blue. It's got these beautiful flowing lines, and one thing that's really fun, so people love their Blu-rays still. It is a 4K Blu-ray player if you want it to be, because there's also a model that's actually shipping without a disk drive, so that you can now basically download all of your games from the PlayStation Store and not have to worry about having those discs in your house anymore.
I thought the design of this console was pretty stunning. It feels like accessories from the movie Tron.
Yeah.
Or
like Westworld. Yeah. It just has that sleek white look. It has, the subdued LED blue lighting and all that kind of stuff. It looks really cool stuff.
I've got to say, because a lot of home theater gear has always been this piano shiny black, which is the worst thing on the planet for collecting dust.
Yes.
They went with sort of a matte finish for the PlayStation 4, which was beautiful, but I have this gorgeous white living room where everything is pristine and very Nordic, and it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. So it feels like PlayStation sort of reached into my design ethos and went, here, we've designed a console for you, which kind of makes sense because when you think about it, the average age of a gamer right now is 37 years old, both male and female. And so the design aesthetic of 15 years ago was reaching out to a much younger audience. Somebody's looking for something that does kind of look like, big, beefy machinery, unrestrained power. Whereas this thing looks just Sexy is actually a really great way to describe it.
What's funny about this entire conversation, Graham, so far is that we haven't really even talked about what it does. Like what's on the inside, what's so good about this? It's all about how cool it looks. I mean, the one interesting point you brought out was that it's got a 4K Blu-ray disc player in it, which is interesting. We've actually got a good article up on our website asking whether physical media like Blu-ray discs are dead or not. And you would be surprised at how many people are still buying the high def 4K discs because the quality to them is much better than the digital copies that we're getting off of online or streaming through Netflix.
That's the primary reason I bought an Xbox One is for the 4K DVD capability of Blu-ray capability for the 4K TV that I have, and it is phenomenal. And I get it. I have all my favorite movies on Blu-ray for that reason.
So if we do actually go back to what this thing is supposed to do, as opposed to look pretty in my home theater stand, it obviously is the next generation of gaming consoles. So incredibly fast processors, very fast GPU, graphics processing unit, tons more RAM. The big one for Sony, though, is adding an SSD, right, a solid state disk. And so the idea here is now that games can be written for SSD. And I can hear all of my PC gaming brethren out there saying, what PCs have had a SSD for a while. Not every developer has been able to rely on the fact that an SSD would be there. So now games are going to be developed with that speed in mind, and that's going to be absolutely fantastic for gamers out there.
Well, from what I read, every game has to load onto that drive to actually play on the unit itself. Any idea when this thing's coming out, Graham?
It's going to be November.
Wow.
I'm going to start lining up in October.
Well, I don't have much time here, but my 2 cents is this will probably be one of their last consoles that come out before consoles aren't a thing anymore, because we will just be streaming games from the cloud to our devices, sure, which is happening now with a lot of services like Stadia and PlayStation Now and what have you. Okay, we're going to have to take a break. We have so much to talk about on today's program. We'll be talking about 5G and what the future of that is here in Canada now that the big players are not using their networking equipment in their network build-outs. We will also be talking about music subscription services and maybe why you want to switch to Tidal. And finally, if you have an old BlackBerry, John's got a way you can play some old Atari games on it. I'll tell you all about that.
You just gave away the punchline.
They don't know how to do it, so we're going to explain how. So there's still some magic left in that. Okay, you're listening to the App Show here on the Chorus Radio Network. Back after this. You're back with the program. Mike Agerbo here with John Biehler. Want to talk about 5G technology. Kind of drifting out there right now with the pandemic. There's been a lot of talk about 5G technology here in Canada, especially when it comes to Huawei, who were I guess, pegged to supply a lot of the infrastructure for a couple of the big carriers here in our country, including TELUS and Bell. And just recently, they both announced that they won't be using any of the Huawei equipment going forward. To date, there hasn't been any word from the Canadian government on their stance on it. Hear a little bit more on the thoughts. We have Kirk LaPointe. He is the man behind business in Vancouver. Thanks for joining us, Kirk.
Great to be here. Thanks.
So I found it interesting. I think the carriers were kind of waiting for the government to announce their official position, but that has never come. I don't know when it's coming. And now they have announced themselves that they're not going to be going forward with Huawei. What's happening with the government? Why are they waffling on this?
Yeah, it's almost like the decision doesn't need to come now.
No.
I mean, really, you've got the large telecommunications firms all basically aligned around technology with Ericsson and Nokia, and Huawei is a shutout. Obviously, there's still lots of Huawei technology in our country, and I don't think that that's going to be shipped out. It's in earlier versions, but even the delay of the spectrum auction the government's doing, I mean, it appears to just not be making any considerable decisions around anything at the moment that isn't directly related to COVID-19. And, you could see that the patience was wearing very, very thin, even pre-pandemic with the carriers. Please, make up our mind, tell us what the rules are, and then we'll figure it out. And no question the apprehension of Meng Wanzhou and her interminable extradition hearing has probably complicated matters for the Trudeau government, as has the case of just the overall relationship with China, some of which flows from her apprehension, but some of it is also based on some other things. So yeah, the Trudeau government was just in a major passage of dithering here, and it hasn't been able to get out of the ditch on this one. I don't know whether there's any kind of conclusion you can make about what the Liberal government was trying to do. I think it was under hefty pressure from the United States, and I don't mean Donald Trump, because I think people look at Donald Trump and think, well, maybe he won't be here much longer, or he kind of loses his attention on all these things. No, I think the considerable pressure was coming most likely from a combination of the Department of Justice and then a great deal from the carriers themselves in the United States, who must have been telling the Canadian carriers for some time, listen, you want your customers to come down here and be using our roaming services. You want them to, you want to tie up the Internet of Things cross-border, and we don't want this company in our midst. Do you really think we're going to let you have this company in your midst and then play fair with you? So I think that there was considerable pressure there as well. It wasn't just governmental dithering that made this happen the way it did last week. I think it has a lot to do with just the pure business relationships.
That's one of the things I was thinking about. It was the fact that they were just basically stalling until Trump leaves office or something changes with that the Huawei situation with him and his government. But I think your points are quite on point.
Yeah, well, I think the possibility there, I think they were waiting for the double criminality decision from the court, assuming that was perhaps the most likely way that Meng Wanzhou would be able to go home, and where you'd get a little bit of a reset in the relationship between Canada and China. But obviously, she's going to be here for quite some time now. This extradition hearing, unless the Americans decide, I have a bit of a theory about this one, that maybe now there's no possible way that Huawei is going to be on the continent serving up 5G technology, even though Canada, I think, has left the door open for some of it. That maybe the Americans go, well, this personal extradition hearing and prosecution, that's very much unlike the way they've been dealing with issues involving alleged espionage on their technology. Maybe we can just let her go and prosecute her in absentia and fine the company and restrict it, because really the restriction is now there. Americans won't use the technology. Canada is effectively opting out of using the technology.
So in essence, did they win this? The Americans, like they didn't want Huawei here in the continent.
Yeah, no, we were really between the proverbial rock and a hard place. Our two largest trading partners on opposite sides of the issue. Here we are, rather puny next to them. 1/16 the size of the American economy and vastly less of the Chinese economy, and we needed at least one of them to like us. And
none of them like us, really.
So we kind of have at least our closest neighbor somewhat not despising us, if you want to look at it in that way. So
I'll still be able to go down and get cheap gas and milk eventually.
Well, yeah, don't count on it tomorrow, though, of course. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting with TELUS and Bell. I guess my thought too is that they're large corporations and they needed certainty as well. They couldn't let this keep drifting for months on end. They have shareholders. They've got networks that have to roll out. So, they had to make a decision at a certain point.
Yeah, and I think they felt comforted by the fact that Rogers was an early adopter with the Ericsson Nokia combo, and most likely we're asking them a lot of questions about their own approaches on this one, and if the technology is acceptable. And I think there was a price point issue, obviously, for the companies. Huawei was offering a considerably better deal in implementation, but in the end, you're right. I mean, how long can you basically hold this back? America was moving forward with 5G. Canada was stuck, and without being able to really go forward with the exception of one carrier that seemed prepared to integrate, the Ericsson Nokia technology into the system. You couldn't have these two major carriers of Bell and Telus sit on the sidelines and wait, because at some point it becomes even more uncompetitive for Canada in the global picture to just kind of be stuck in a 4G era when, or at least most of its infrastructure in the 4G era, when everybody else is building things with the new technology.
We're talking with Kirk LaPointe. He's the publisher and editor-in-chief at Business in Vancouver Media Group, all about the 5G technology networks here in Canada. I guess Trudeau's government not making a decision and don't seem to have much on the horizon for that, and maybe they don't need to anymore. I guess one thought too, Telus and Bell might have been holding out for a bit of compensation for the money they've already invested in their networks with Huawei.
Yeah, I mean, you do wonder about the so-called future considerations that come into this because, on the other hand, I'm not so sure that their decision necessarily alleviates the Trudeau government of any international concerns it might have. I think we haven't seen any evidence yet that China is prepared for another wave of punitive measures, both for the Meng Wanzhou case, but for this decision in particular. I'm not sure we're going to see those necessarily during the pandemic. I think that this is a time for countries by and large to play nice with each other by virtue of a lot of the public health information that we have to share, and obviously some of the trade lines that have to reopen. And so in a way we can't afford to alienate each other terribly much. But that day may come. I'm not so sure that either Telus or Bell were fully expecting that they'd get some kind of infrastructure support for this. But they did, as you recall, they were lobbying very heavily for that about a year ago, which is if you don't want us, if you're not going to sanction Huawei, if you're not going to let the market decide how it is that we choose 5G technology to implement, we've got billions of dollars sunk in right now. And we've got lots of research taking place in this country that needs to be somehow compensated for. So it's possible that there's future considerations coming. I haven't heard of any. Our reporters can't find that out yet, and it doesn't appear to be something that they're discussing.
We've been talking with Kirk LaPointe, publisher and editor-in-chief at Business in Vancouver Media Group. He's done a fantastic article going through some of the finer points on this and your opinions as well. So I encourage our listeners to check that out. BIV.com, right?
You bet.
Very good. Thanks for joining us today, Kirk.
Great to be with you. Thanks a lot for your time.
You are back with the App Show. Mike, John, and Graham here today. Let's talk music subscription services. So many people are using that now. Not using the CDs or the cassette tapes anymore. Music subscription services literally count in the hundreds of millions now between Spotify and Apple Music and Amazon. Another service out there that some people aren't aware of, or actually many, I think, would be Tidal. And we want to talk about that today and some of the advantages that it has over the others out there right now. Graham, maybe give a quick synopsis of where Tidal came from.
For sure. So when you take a look at music streaming services right now, they're good enough, right? Like it really comes down to the audio quality of what it is that we're listening to. And for a lot of people, if you're listening on a pair of, AirPods or other inexpensive headphones, it sounds okay. For people who do really like to get into their music, though, the bit rate of your music actually matters. So this kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Blu-ray earlier, is that bit rate is not as high on streaming. So there's got to be a bit of a middle ground between, having the original CD in your house, having the original Blu-ray in your house, and the streaming that we have. And so Tidal's basically found that space, which is higher bit rate, higher quality audio for people who have sound systems that can support it. So if you're listening on a pair of reference bookshelf speakers or some high-end headphones, and you've got the ears that can hear this sort of thing, this is really appealing for a lot of people.
But Tidal is more expensive because of that.
It is, yeah. Now, their value proposition has been to folks who, again, would pay money for a pair of reference bookshelf speakers or expensive headphones. So I think the folks out there who consider themselves audiophiles, they're willing to pay the money. They have started to add some additional things on as well, though. They've included things like music videos or specific mastered tracks that are designed solely for them. The big one recently, though, is the addition of Dolby Atmos for music.
And why is that a big deal? I think a lot of us keep seeing that, but not fully understanding what Dolby Atmos is.
This is a way to, the way they put it is to really immerse yourself in music. So when you think about surround sound, right, you've got those channels that are in front of you. You've got those channels beside you. You've got those channels behind you. You've got the subwoofer that's really rounding out the low end. The only other place that we could go literally is up. And so that's actually what Atmos does, is it gives you that height speaker as well to give you some sound that can envelop you over top of you. When this originally rolled out, it was in theaters, and so they had the ability to very easily put speakers into the ceiling. We saw a lot of folks out there start to do that as Atmos came out as a standard, basically throw some in-ceiling speakers in. Sonance had some really great models that did this, as did Triad. But for a lot of us, I've got a concrete ceiling. I can't put speakers up there. So we're starting to see more and more sound bars that are using reflective technology. And so basically it bounces the sound off your ceiling and back down to you. So Tidal's taking advantage of that. And if you do really love to get into your music, there's really no other way to do that than this.
It is interesting. I think a lot of us are used to paying the $10 a month for the streaming, the music subscription, be it Spotify or Apple. I actually have both. I don't know why. One part of my family likes Apple, the other part likes Spotify. And I look at Tidal, and I think, to get the high quality version, I think, was it like $23 or $27 a month?
It's about that, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I just look at that, I'm like, oh my God, that's so stupidly expensive. But then I think back to the CD days. How much were CDs?
$20 to $30 a pop.
Yeah, right? Like, yeah, they were hitting up at around $20, $23, during the end of times there for CDs. And I was buying a few of them a month. Like, I was probably spending $60 a month on CDs. So the value is incredible now. Like, you literally, when you subscribe to one of these services, they have tens of millions of songs. And we're like, oh my God, I got to pay $10 or $20 a month. Like, we are living the dream. Could you imagine like 20 years ago if, I said to you, you know what, all the CDs you're buying right now, you're spending like $50 to $75 a month on all of them. How about for $10 a month, you can have access to like 25 million songs? That would blow your mind.
It's a little like going to the buffet, right?
Yes.
I mean, we used to dine out with our CDs at, $30 a pop a couple of times a month. And the food was good. It was really great quality. And, you took the time to really enjoy that meal. You dug into every part of it. You cleaned your plate. Now we're at the buffet of streaming. So can you remember the last time you sat down and listened to an entire album on your streaming service?
No, the problem I have with streaming now is just finding the right playlist. Remember in the old days, yeah, you'd sit down and listen to a whole album. Maybe you had a CD that had a mix, like the Much Music Mix albums or CDs. Now, like, I just have anxiety, like trying to find the right playlist. Like, I used to try to make my own. Oh my God, that was just a nightmare. Because you just get so into trying to find the right songs. I kind of gave up on that, and I'm just lazy. And thank God for Alexa. And I've got my Sonos system. I just say, hey, play some smooth music or play something. Oh, I should have shut Alexa off here.
I think one of the interesting things about Tidal, though, that I didn't realize until I looked into it is, aside from the artist-owned cooperative that sort of founded it all, Jay-Z being one of the main founders of it, one of the interesting things that they offer that I haven't really seen, at least as deep of an offering anywhere else, is the live music and concert series that they offer. They actually have an amazing YouTube channel where it's all free to watch, but there's even more on the service. So that would, if you're really like live music, especially when we can't get it right now, that might be a compelling thing to take a look at. And the service does start around $13 Canadian and goes up to $27 depending on the quality that you want to buy into. So it's, kind of like you said, it's still a pretty good value for what you're getting. And if you're getting some artists that you can't see in concert right now, that might be a compelling reason at least to give it a try.
I haven't signed up for it yet, but I am going to try it, to be honest, because I love music, and I've got a half decent stereo system in my family room here now. So, and I love listening to concerts, especially ones that, like a video version of that. So I will have to check that out. Okay, we're going to have to take a break. When we come back, so much more to talk about here on the App Show. Later on, John's going to tell us the magic way to play Atari games on your old BlackBerry. I don't know how you even booted up a BlackBerry to find this out, but we'll get into that. But coming up next, we'll be talking about the app stores. And if you've got one of the new Huawei phones or looking at one of them, they don't have the Google Play App Store anymore. You have to use the Huawei version, and we'll tell you what you need to do to find your favorite apps. You're listening to the App Show here on the Corus Radio Network. Back after this. You are back with the App Show. Mike Agerbo here. I got fellow app nerds Graham and John with me, and we are going to talk about apps and how to get them. If you have been following the Huawei saga and the ongoing trade war with the U.S. and China, you'll soon learn that if you are going to purchase one of the new Huawei phones, and they are pretty amazing as far as the technology and the cameras go, they are using Android as well, but they don't have the Google mobile services on there. So it doesn't come with the Google Play Store where you would get apps. It doesn't come with things like YouTube and Gmail. You have to get apps other ways. So currently right now, this would be some of their newer models, the Huawei Mate 30 Pro, and the newest one coming out here, I believe in July, the P40 Pro. And, John, you and I have had a chance to try these phones out, over the past 6 months or even past year and a half, really, the different models. And they've got some of the better cameras out in the marketplace right now.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, everybody on the show right now, we're all Apple people primarily, but Huawei really made me interested in the Android tech because they just seem to be doing things a little bit faster and further ahead than everybody else. And I'm still rocking the P30 Pro that I've had for about a year now. So, and it's my favorite Android phone. It has everything I need. It's got an amazing camera. Unlike the P40 that you have, Mike, though, mine does have the Google stuff. So
yes.
I don't have the same problem you have yet, but when I do want to upgrade this phone, then I'm going to have to see what my options are. And so you've tried out this Pedal app.
Yeah, this is interesting. At first, I was concerned. I thought, oh my God, they're dead. Like if you don't have the Google Play Store, how are you going to get apps on there? Well, it's surprisingly easy. And again, you have to keep in mind that Android is an open source operating system. What Google has done is kind of Googled it. They've given it their Google flavor by putting the Google, mobile services on it and putting their, Google Android Play Store on there too. But something to keep in mind, there are other Android app stores out there. A famous one would be Amazon. For their Kindle tablets and what have you, they have got their own Amazon Android store that optimizes Android apps to work really well on their gear. So Huawei, they have created their own as well. It's called the Huawei App Gallery, and they are spending untold sums of money to get apps in there, like all your favorite ones. So that's still ongoing. The challenge is not all of them are in there. So that's where some of these alternative app stores come in. And so now, just recently, they have instituted a new thing called Pedal Search, and that's like the flower pedal, P-E-T-A-L. You can basically go into their app store and download that. And from there, you can find pretty well every Android app that you want to get a hold of. Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook. You basically do a search. It'll pop up right on the screen there where you can get it from. You click it, and it installs right on the phone. It's dead easy on it. And so the nice thing, too, which was a concern about going to sometimes these alternative app stores, is that it does provide the updates as well. There's a section in there that you can go to update those apps as you go along. Is it perfect? No, but it makes it super easy to get the apps at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see how well their phones do over the next 6 months. From what we've seen on some of the sales numbers, they're still killing it as far as phone sales around the world. Still really big in Europe as well.
I think that was probably the main reservation that a lot of people had was, how do I get these apps onto my phone? So I guess if you're out there and you've been looking at a Huawei and you've been a little hesitant, now could be the time.
Yeah. Again, John, I just point to the cameras. I think the cameras on here are fantastic, especially if you are a photography enthusiast, whether that be amateur or, up there. I know, John, you are really good at photography and you even love the night mode on those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think that's the key point, though. And I think that's probably why they're so popular in a lot of places is even without the Google side of the equation, they're still really great hardware at a very compelling price compared to some of its other flagship competitors. So if you want to get all of those bells and whistles, some new, even bleeding edge stuff, a little app workaround is not a big deal for most people. And they've certainly made it even simpler with this pedal app. Sideloading isn't that complicated. It's just, it can be a little tricky if you've never done it before. And this app sort of removes that nerdy side hustle thing you have to do before.
Yeah, again, it'll be interesting to see how the sales go overall. Apparently, they're still selling well with their phones. And from what I understand, the new P40 Pro, which will be coming out, which is their new flagship phone, I think, again, in July, we haven't got an exact date on that. It looks like all the major carriers here in Canada are going to be picking it up. So if you want some more information on this, we've actually got a few great videos on our YouTube channel at GetConnected Media, and you can go to our website as well. We'll have a tutorial on how you can get those apps into your Huawei phone. It's pretty simple. Okay, we're going to have to take a break. And John, when we come back, we're going to talk Atari on a BlackBerry. And I'm going to be curious to understand how you even got to that place where you broke out your old BlackBerry and thought, I'm going to load some Atari games on here. So stay tuned. You're listening to The App Show here on the Chorus Radio Network. Back after this. You are back with The App Show. Mike Agerbo here with John Biehler and Graham Williams. Let's talk Atari. John, you are the retro king. The retro gaming king. I love it too. Make no mistake. I've actually got one of those little Raspberry Pi computers set up to play all my favorite old games, be it Atari or arcade games. You have found a way to get some old Atari stuff on a BlackBerry. How did you how did you wake up in the morning and think, this is where what I gotta do today?
So recently I posted about the Odroid Go Advance, which is a really cool little handheld console that you can buy that is basically like a Raspberry Pi 4, and it can emulate everything, including Dreamcast, Nintendo 64, PlayStation, you name it, it can play it. And it plays it really well and really effectively. But my personal favorite all-time computer of all time was the Atari 8-bit computer line. This is what I had when I was a kid. I got an Atari 800 XL for Christmas one year, and I had all the other computers that they made ever since then.
You could only afford the Atari 400. You guys were rich.
Well, I didn't even get the 400 though. That was a couple years later that the 800 came out. So you had a couple years on me on that. So anyways, I found out that you can actually install the Atari 800, which is sort of covers all the 8-bit games and ROMs and things like that on the Odroid. But the problem is that this is a game console, and it just has
a Game Boy.
Yeah, it has a D-pad, like joysticks and buttons, but it doesn't have a keyboard. And those old Atari computers were really kind of cool because you plug them into your TV and you had a keyboard, you had a plug-in for an Atari joystick, and so you could use the keyboard and the joystick at the same time for some games. And playing that on the emulator, it was just like, well, some of my favorite games, you need a keyboard to play, even just to start it. Like, it's kind of crazy. And I was going down nostalgia lane, going through all the games. And by the way, you can get pretty much every game ever made for the Atari on the Internet Archive, archive.org, and just go into software and then pick your favorite console, computer, whatever from any time. They've got millions of games and apps and all the stuff for that stuff. It's really cool and it's completely free. But anyways, I was like, it'd be really nice if I had a keyboard on this thing, but then I'm going to be like, why don't I just use my computer? But the whole idea is to have this something that's portable. And then I remembered, oh yeah, I have this BlackBerry Android phone that has a keyboard. This is a Key 2 LE that I had for a review a couple years ago. And it's an Android phone, and Android has a really good version of the Atari emulator on it. So I now have the ability to play all my favorite Atari games with a keyboard. And there's even an on-screen joystick if you want it, but a lot of the games that I wanted to play need a keyboard. And you can even remap your buttons to use the keyboard. If you want to play with like a joystick style, like, the typical gaming keyboard style, the WASD, and it's completely free and it's super fun. It's really faithful music.
How do you have time to do this? I don't understand. I don't.
What do you think I do all day, Mike?
Play Atari games, apparently. Very cool. Okay, I think we are out of time here, but I want to call out the website again, getconnectedmedia.com. Got tons of great articles and videos and blogs up there. And of course, the contest giving away a Belkin accessory prize pack this month. You want to see what's in it? Got to go to our website and subscribe to our newsletter. Again, getconnectedmedia.com. Want to thank Graham and John, as always, fantastic co-hosts here on the program. And I want to thank the rest of the team, Christina, Paul, Nigel, and Stephen, and AJ. We'll see you again next time.